Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead. Welcome to season 4.
On today's episode of She Blaze, we're giving you all the things that's happening in the cannabis industry, from cannabis corporations to legalized states. So let's jump into these hot topics.
Let's do it. Okay, what you got for us? What you got
Since
for
we've
us?
been gone, that's what I want to play, like the Kelly Clarkson. Since we've been gone, because it's been a minute.
It has.
There's so many things that have popped off these last 6 weeks that we've been on our season break. Oh my goodness. And I've been like, we have been on IG a few times to catch people up, but I'm so glad to be back and to tell you guys all the great things that's happening first, which we're going to have to get out of the United States and hop over to Thailand. As we've reported on different seasons, Thailand, they're making some major moves in the cannabis industry. Well, recently, they have started a law that basically will privatize the medical use of cannabis. They're already allowing the government to grow it, hospitals to use it, but now they're letting everyday people in Thailand grow it and use it as well. Now, this is a huge step in difference from the Americas, because we basically allow people to privatize cannabis first before the government knows what the benefits are, what they can do, or anything. So Thailand took a different approach. And with it opening the private sector, it's allowing for people that are international to come in and to invest in the companies. Now, they cannot exceed more than 1/3 of the company. So that still allows Thailand nationals to be in control. However, it still opens it up for people like us to go in. Their law also talks about imports and exports. It's already passed the cabinet and it moves on to parliament.
Okay, well, I was over here clapping for folks who are hearing us. Y'all can't see us. I was clapping, I was cheering because Thailand is definitely really leading the way. Southeast Asia is notoriously strict as it pertains to cannabis possession. This is the area of the world where you can get a death sentence for cannabis trafficking. So Thailand is a very big pioneer in that way. And we've reported in the past about some of the things that they've done when they started giving THC oil to hospitals. We've reported in the past about them removing cannabis from their drug list altogether. So this is all part of the steps in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. And I'm excited because it means that there is more diversity of product. Government can be very much focused on efficiency and not on diversity, right? And I think that what we're probably seeing is the same type of product overall as far as government is concerned. And so if they're really wanting to heal their nation and provide the best, I think, medicine, because for them it's a medical cannabis program, they do need to open it up. But there are some risks now. And so first I'll say I'm giving them props because they also knew to keep folks out long enough to get them enough information. To your point, we have FDA, DEA constantly on the books saying really crazy things and erroneous and not based in cannabis science. But yet at the same time, now they're kind of playing catch up on what the regulatory structure should be like. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But the fact of the matter is, like, this is more the correct way. It also is understanding the medicinal side first before deciding we're going, do more.
Heck yeah. Well, I am excited. Thailand is a great way to start off the season 4, episode 1 of She Blaze because we got our eye on them and they are doing some big things. I think someone in Thailand is listening to She Blaze over there, okay?
I think so too. I hope so. And if you are, if you ever need any type of regulatory guidance, we got you. Because the truth of the matter is that right now you're at least making the right steps. And so I commend leadership over there in understanding that cannabis is medicine first and always. And to set up the right ecosystem, that has to be foundational. Absolutely.
Heck yeah. Well, let's go push it to our hot topic number 2, which is in America, and it's also in a transitional phase.
Okay, hot
Texas.
topic number 2.
Yes, we taking you to
So
the
Thailand
dirty
to
south.
Texas.
Thailand to Texas, yes, ma'am, and we are taking you to the dirty south, where Texas has now banned smokable and vapable hemp. Now we are seeing this take literally state after state. They are doing the same things, but in the same breath, they turn around and they're opening hemp processing cultivation applications in the state as well. So they're like, hey, you can't smoke it, you can't vape it, you can't eat it, you can't do shit with it, but you can apply to get a license to grow it. If y'all just want to do industrialized hemp, just say that. Stop having us do all these things and make all these products, open these new businesses just to see it blossom and then create a law that basically shuts it down.
I am frustrated because this is something that we've been talking about, right? Like, so we're going into years of saying the flower is important. And as much as I understand that people don't get that, smoking tobacco versus smoking cannabis, two different things, how you consume or smoke in sense of what you roll it up, very different things. But if you have in your state tobacco legalized for purchase in smokable formats, then, and it's a really like high, a high selling industry for you, then it is really, really, really poor business decision as a state business, right? To open a market that does not include the format that, one, can transition a lot of people from smoking tobacco, which we know is carcinogenic and cancer causing, right? Same difference, same word, to something that is better for them, right? Even if you don't want people to smoke, people are smoking. So that's a great way to transition. So it's better for your community, but also it's better for your dollar. All the markets that have already opened, even the ones we're talking about where it's just hemp flower is still a really important component of the market. So when people keep opening markets, New York is one of them, medical market is open, there's no flower there. It's so erroneous, it's so silly, and it's based on all what we know, which is, one, that apparently smoking flower is equal to smoking tobacco, and that's just not true because the different products, different chemicals, right, that actually are getting burned. And then the other thing is that too, that hemp flower obviously looks very similar to marijuana flower. You can't tell the difference between the two, and so therefore it's probably the case that hemp flower is part of the legacy market as well. I think it's Reggie's. And police departments in these states are still using hemp flower and the smell and the terpenes and all of that as a way to arrest predominantly Black and brown individuals. That's just a fact, and they don't want to change it. And so it's a laziness combined with an ignorance, right? And so I get frustrated because why are we letting either lazy people or ignorant people decide what's going to happen with our bodies and what we need as a community?
Absolutely. Also, why are we creating Texas Department State Health Services consumable hemp programs to ban the thing?
Yes.
Y'all done created this program just to be like, psych, no, y'all, we just not gonna let y'all do it at all. And then retailers that sell these type of products have to be registered with the state hemp program by October 2nd. So, just to put that out there, that's how it is going to be. And they open the application process. I'll send a link to that in the comments, but we're not
So
going to get
now,
in.
another question I have to ask Ice, because you dropped a little bit of information that was really important. You said that retailers like the gas station or a smoke shop that sell hemp products, we're not talking about marijuana products, but now these retailers have to be registered with the state because why?
Because they said so.
Exactly.
And it is 150 per facility, so it's not a crazy amount, but
But
it
it's
is
tracking.
kind of, yeah, but it's like, if we're now not being able to sell certain things of our product catalog, you've taken that 150 out of my pocket, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
is it worth investing in, especially if it's a gas station? They already have their liquor license, they have their tobacco license, they have their, if you have the little scratch off things, you got to pay to get the
The
license to
lottery.
have the lottery. Yes. So again, it's just another bill on top of it, and now you're slashing half of their products that they sell. So, is it something even worth getting a license for, or just removing it from your store altogether?
Yeah, I feel worried about the outlets for CBD, hemp derived CBD products because of this. It's also like, I think of it as tracking. So you need to get one. Yes, I don't mind giving the 155 if the state is giving me something back beyond just keeping my name and information and coming by my shop whenever you want just to see if I'm selling flour, right? Still or not. Those are the things I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about how we are often very racially biased in the way we regulate. And so how do we know that that doesn't lead to Black owned hemp shops being harassed and treated unfairly? We've seen it happen before. So I think this is a case of overregulation. And I feel like that, we've got to put stop signs up when we see that states and municipalities are doing that. And it feels very fear-based, but also going back to what I said, continuing to control the flow of product through the prison industrial complex, right? And the main product being free labor or low cost
Hello.
labor.
Okay. Two pennies an hour labor. But
Yeah.
as we talk about their hemp program, we do have to go and look at the city of Austin. It is, as I was informed by you, it is the progressive city of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, their city council has asked their police department to please stop arresting people for minor, low level uh, cannabis possession. They're
Mm-hmm.
saying they can't afford it. They can't afford to test it. They can't afford to convict on it. Give them a ticket and let them go. Well, the
Right.
city chief of police and the police of Austin was like, no, that's what they said in January. They was like, that's cute, but we're not doing that. And so now they are changing their tune. They released something in July that basically said, we agree, we're going to, cut back on the actual arrest of minor cannabis possessions. But
Okay.
in the same breath, they have about an 8% Black population in the city of Austin. But
Mm-hmm.
the black population actually represents 87% of the arrests for minor cannabis possessions.
This is what I'm talking about, right? Like, these are the things that are like, yo, how disproportionate can you get? 8% of the population, but damn near 90% of the arrests. That's when we are just really turning a blind eye to what are clear disparities. Everybody has possession in Austin. White people, Caucasian people consume cannabis at the same rates as people of color. Do not be fooled by these lopsided statistics to assume that just we are more likely to be. We're not. Equal likelihood. What we are more likely to be is harassed. And so I'm glad to hear that there's some movement. I think the George Floyd has certainly caused a lot of police departments to look at certain tactics, everyday tactics that create unwanted police interaction. And marijuana possession is one of them.
Hello.
Smell is one of the number one reasons to have an unwanted police interaction. And we've got to retrain police officers to really just, not use that as a trigger. And it's a hard thing because I'm telling you, I'm from that era. And as a person who did not use during that time period of growing up, when it was really like aggressively like utilized as the thing to catch criminals, I certainly had to retrain myself. And part of it was understanding the science. Now, I'm a scientist, so it was a little bit easier. I don't think that that's going to work for the police department. What's going to work for the police department is having penalties affiliated with implementation still of old law, old regulation. What does that mean? A demerit system. It doesn't mean you need to lose your job, but if you're bringing someone in and the only thing you have as the cause is that you smelled cannabis, guess what? All that paperwork you're doing, you're going to be doing some extra paperwork because we're probably going to have to do some sort of restitution for this individual. Make it so that the police department pays. They're getting all of the money anyway. So it's like every time you make that mistake, guess what? We've got to get it covered. It's coming out of your check. Something along those lines will stop the behavior. And I think we have to be very, very clear why that behavior still exists and why the disproportionate rate in which Black and Indigenous populations are being arrested. It's because we still have in our mind that that is the criminal, even without cannabis involved, right? We have in our mind that that's the person that is okay to harass. Especially in states like Texas, especially when you're the police department, because your history is one of slave catchers. And that hasn't really changed from the vibe, the code of ethics. And I think over time, hopefully progressive cities like Austin will lead the way. But I'm not giving no passes anymore on mistakes of this nature when you are in a decriminalized zone. I won't use state, obviously, because they've already said no flower and they're still using that loophole for state. But in this city, now the police chief reverses it. Great. Golf clap. Now do your job, as it says.
Right. We need to see some of these percentages drop on arrests, clearly. So I definitely wanted to talk about that, but we're going to move to a little bit more of a federal level on our third hot topic to just quickly discuss and bring people up to date with what's happening with the FDA. So the FDA released a draft of guidelines for their cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds quality considerations for clinical research. The thing we've been screaming at them to do, they finally released a draft. And so I'm going to let you take it over and lead this discussion, Dasheeda, because you got some great tips to really help move this forward in a better way.
Well, thank you so much, Ice. First, I'm like, where do I start? Because, the FDA is also a place of frustration. But that is also, I think, why I was so keen on moving into the government, because I feel you can be a more powerful change agent from within. But you can also be a change agent from outside the government as well. And so what this is a draft, as I said. It means that it is something that is now being circulated among the public for comments. And so I want to definitely call into action, folks, because there's only 60 days to provide comments. And this draft was released to public in July, and we're already in August. So we've already probably passed or coming up on 30 days. It's important for folks to read it. It's a very long document, to your point. And so just to give a really high level in this hot topics, one, we're going to leave in the comments the link. And I want to call out any medical professionals, folks who are participating with Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, any science individuals. If you are interested at all in the idea of clinical research, you need to read this, and you need to also give your feedback. And it's going to be easy because you can do it digitally. So I'll give them props for always having a digital way to take feedback, but you can also mail in if you want to do that as well. Some of the key things that are in this document is really around how the FDA is currently thinking as it pertains to clinical research, as it pertains to hemp, marijuana, all being cannabis, as it pertains to what we are referring to in terms of terms. Some of it I don't necessarily agree with personally, but the reason I'm calling out the terms is because this is where we learn as advocates what the terms are internally, and we are using those same things to make sure that anything we don't want, we clear on what we don't want, and anything that we do want more of, we're clear on what we do want more of. Some of the terms that popped out is like, how are they defining cannabis? Because cannabis is a plant that can be made into so many different things. And so they're talking about drugs specifically in this write-up. And it's about drugs containing cannabis or cannabis-derived compounds. So those are the molecules, CBD, THC, those are cannabis-derived compounds. And it's important to note that they refer to cannabis-related compounds, something very different. And again, if you're a lay person, you're probably like, what is the difference between derived and related? Because it sounds like the same. And that's where I want to point out, cannabis-related compounds are synthetic versions of cannabis compounds. They are the things that are made in the lab to look like the natural compounds that come from the plant. And a little bit scarier, that is not in consideration in this report or this draft. So it's only cannabis, real cannabis, and that's, in my opinion, hemp and marijuana, and cannabis derived. And so what this is also doing is setting a precedent, even though they're focused primarily on the hemp side, because that's actually federally legal, it is setting a precedent on when marijuana becomes federally illegal. Because one thing I will say, the FDA is aware of, because they have a patent in the US government, is that marijuana creates the same cannabinoid products or the cannabis derived compounds as well. So that's why this is important for us to get right. That's why it's important for us as advocates. If you are in this space as community leaders, thought leaders, you need to write up your comments, and you need to make sure that we're holding them true to real cannabis science. Nothing in this report needs to be things based on bro science, street science, or any of the old thoughts of the draconian laws that we've had in the last 80 years. Point blank, period. And we should call it out. So I'm currently redlining it myself, and of course wanting to call to the table all of the advocates, especially if you have a science or health professional background. This is key. This is the time. And I think the last thing I would say is that the guidance documents are not about laws, right? So they're not establishing legally enforceable responsibilities, right? Instead, it's just to share what the agency or the FDA is currently thinking on the topic, and aren't really just recommendations, which means that they can change. It means that unless they have a very specific regulatory or statutory requirement cited, it's just a recommendation. And so that's, again, this is the most flexible part of the process, and we want to make sure this is where we interject our opinion.
Thank you so much for dropping these jewels. It's really, really important. So we're going to get that information to you guys as quickly as possible in the comments. And again, we want to encourage you, even if you don't have a science background, make some comments, get a study group together, because Lord know I need one with this long ass paper, and going through and highlighting some things that we don't like and the things that we know we really, really want. So thank you so much. And that actually leads us into our main topic, which is a bunch of topics, because we got a lot of tea to catch y'all up on, because these cannabis streets is hot, honey.
Yes.
Hello. And as the FDA gives us draft guidelines, they also approves their one cannabis or cannabinoid drug that is FDA approved, GW Pharmaceuticals. They added another treatment of a disease they could treat. Basically, they are linked for helping epileptic seizures for a certain type of disease. But now they extended it past that disease and added another disease, which will treat epileptic seizures.
That was good, Ice. I am impressed. Yes, honey. Okay, you better work your journalistic skills. That is exactly the case. When you are doing FDA approved, this is, in my opinion, from my time in medical school and my experience working on a couple of things, this is how the FDA gets you for your money. Because every time you want to say that you have efficacy or something works for a specific thing, you have to go and apply. And that means going through trials for that specific thing and getting the FDA to say, yep, you're right. But it also means giving the FDA some paper. So in my opinion, if you wanted to get FDA approval, oftentimes you want to try to do so in a broad way. They're a pharmaceutical company. And so same way these clinical research guidelines are more aligned with the pharmaceutical process is very specific to what we call as indications. That means that there are many diseases that can lead down a path towards a seizure, as I said. And they focused on one particular one, which was Dravet syndrome, the same one that Charlotte's Web was created for initially. And they've gotten approval there. And so now they're traveling down another path because they got the dollars to spend, where they're getting approval on other diseases where a seizure is one of the indications, meaning a seizure is a potential outcome of that disease. And so, they're steady on, it's like collecting houses in the Monopoly game. That's what that's doing, Now, it doesn't mean that they're the only ones that can do it. Anybody else can come right behind. They're setting precedent, though. And it's important for us to recognize that that is precedent being set and therefore worthy of research. And if you're doing anything where you're looking to specifically deal with ailments, again, in the clinical research world, GW Pharma is at least a benchmark because they've already been through the process.
Okay, and they keep going through the process.
So they got coin.
And their coin is actually actively traded on the stock market. And so since we're talking about coins and stock markets, we have to talk about these big cannabis corporations because that's one of my favorite teas to give. The SEC is suing 2 cannabis enterprises for allegedly scamming people out of $25 million, honey. Yes. Now, if you don't know what the SEC is, we don't got enough time to explain it to you, but they rule and regulate the stock exchange in America. And right now, it's so interesting because they said that these 2 cannabis enterprises were raising money from September 2017 to February 2019. So basically a 3-year period, they were raising money from different investors for 6 to 9 different companies, allegedly. Some of these companies we've heard of: Green Growth Ventures, RJ Holdings Group, Smart Initiatives. There's a whole list of them, truthfully. It's a long, long list. And their investors are knocking. They're like, where's my money? We've given you guys over millions of dollars. Where are the receipts? They are being sued because they are saying that they had business loans that they never got approved for them. They also allegedly have misappropriated the millions of investments that they got. So are these men going to jail or no?
I'm just wondering. I don't want to say my answer on the record about whether they're going to jail, but this is the exact reason why we've got to have more cannabis competent individuals running or being a part of regulatory structures, because this would have been stopped out the gate. But my biggest thing is that when we talk about how many arrests are happening as a result of marijuana possession alone, and yet this type of white collar crime is, nothing more than a slap on the wrist, or folks turn around and be a part of another conglomerate company, right, group, and in the next new industry, that is the difference between being a white man in this country and being a person of color, period. This is ridiculous, and it's almost to the point where it's just like, this type of stuff is what makes the cannabis industry illegitimate still, but legitimate at the same time. Because guess what? We got a lot of legal industries that exist, more mature. We know what happened with the housing market, right? Was supposed to be legitimate. Whenever there's a chance to scam, it seems like there will be people that want to take advantage of it. But of course, it is mostly, again, white men, and they are not necessarily being held to task. These are the times where I'm like, where is our 45-year minimum here? You know what I mean? You could throw apparently a Molotov cocktail into an empty police car and you're going to get a 45-year minimum that you're facing. But this 25 million that you've been scamming from nearly 400 investors, and in some ways you impact the whole cannabis economy too, because that doesn't just impact those investors. The stock market is all about how things do in comparison to each other too. You know what I mean? And so this is the type of stuff that I'm just like, it's like the 20 million of illegal product falling off the back of the truck for what's to call it? The cannabis company out in California. We don't do Cushy Punch. We just don't see how it ever is even an equitable enforcement, right? This is the time where instead of arresting these people in Austin, right, at this ridiculous 87% rate, we should be arresting these guys. So that's why when you say, are they going to spend time in jail or not? I can't answer that because I don't.
They no-knock search warrant.
I can't answer that.
No one laughed, but it's okay. So go ahead. You said it good. There are 400 investors. They basically said they had a cannabis farm, a CBD extraction facility ain't no one seen or heard of. And so, their investors are coming knocking, and the SEC can only sue them if they can find them. So let's move on to another multi-state operator. It is called Jushi. Yes. They actually are a multi-state cannabis operation for cannabis and hemp. We've heard of them a few times. We've seen them be top tier sponsors at different conferences, but they are actually running in the red as far as their P&L, as they are increasing their debt from 18 million to 33 million.
Yeah. So Jushi Holdings is a multi-state operator. I want to quickly just correct you and say that they are hemp and marijuana because both are cannabis. So I just want to keep getting everybody. I hate
that because they all are cannabis. Everything.
So we could just call it a cannabis company, but they are playing in both of the regulatory arms. That's the way I've been looking at it, right? Because we do believe in science in these parts. And so I agree with you that it is a little bit odd that they are now upping their debt, but I just wanted to give a quick thought around the fact that this is common, right? When you are in growth phase, you are really trying to figure out your balance sheet, and that's really your assets and your liabilities, and debt falls under liabilities. And having what we call good debt is not a bad thing when you are a big company or even a developing or a new venture. And my guess is that they do have quite a bit of investment money that has already been put in. But the other thought is that with debt, it can be a safer cost of capital, right? So investment cost of capital is how much equity you want to give away. Debt cost of capital is your interest rate. And oftentimes you can have a little bit more leeway, especially when it is a market like what's happening with COVID. People are offering some of the lower interest rates to compete with the things that are happening with SBA and so on and so forth. So newer loan products are coming to market and you can actually negotiate a good interest rate. And that would be something that's pretty regular. It doesn't change, and it can be something that eventually goes away off your balance sheet, as opposed to the equity, for the most part, unless you buy it back, is always standing. So there's just ways that you want to approach it. And I have been on a panel with the former president, but there's been changes, like he resigned, and so now they're taking on this additional debt. I want to see what else they roll out. This is a Florida-based company, and so Florida has a pretty big medical marijuana program already, and there's already at the forefront of hemp, just based on the location. And so more to come. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but we've seen these big companies poorly spend their money, however they're getting it, investment, sales, or debt, right? And I feel like I just want to see that someone in these MSOs, someone knows how to run a P&L.
We shall see. So I said that to tell you guys to keep your eye on the tea. And I'm ready to talk about legalized states, because as we talk about these big cannabis corporations, honestly, they would be non-existent if the state hasn't legalized. So
Fair
let's
enough.
push it to Illinois, where we've been watching them all year because they were legal January 1. And it's been recently reported that in the month of July, they nearly made 61 million in sales.
That is a round of applause. I mean, and people are like, well, what's the context? This is a very new market. And by comparison, Oregon, which is a mature market, meaning it's 5 years old and definitely intended to be a smaller market than Illinois, basically in May, Oregon had 100 million in sales, and that was a new record. So you already see that Illinois, even though it's in its infant stages compared to a mature market, is already up there. So that was exciting to see.
It is exciting to see, as they've now nearly reached their 300 million mark for adult use sales starting January 1. And ultimately, the taxes on the cannabis is half the sale. But ultimately, it still is pretty dope, because Illinois is one of those states where it is like New York, like a Georgia, like a California, where it's these big international, huge tourist spots. So even through COVID, they are still making money and staying on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I got to call out, of course, is equity. I want to shout out to Toy Hutchison, who's a senior advisor over the cannabis office or program in Illinois, Black woman. And I definitely respect, she's also essentially the brainchild behind the Illinois legalization law, and has now, been tapped to oversee getting it started. So bet on a Black woman getting it done. And one of the things that Illinois has done has set aside some of the tax revenue. Last I checked in May, it was over 30 million. Some of the tax revenue that's just really intended to be reinvestment into the communities that have been harmed and or targeted during the war on drugs. That 87% that you're seeing in like Austin, for example, that is the number in other places. And Chicago is no different, but then even in the suburbs, we're still seeing that we Black and Hispanic, Indigenous folks are the people that are getting arrested in droves. And so that is that money intended for those type of reinvestments and reparations in the way of repairing the harm there. One of the things that I think, though, we should note is this is still an all-white market, meaning this 300 million, that was sales for all-white companies. They have not yet actually delivered any licenses to individuals, equity or not, that is Black owned. And we knew that going into the beginning of the year, because what they did was grandfathered in their medical producers into the adult market. And that's essentially who's been running the adult market. And as you remember, we reported in the first month or two, they actually started to run out of cannabis. So since then, I feel like obviously there's been an opportunity to re-up, if you will, and the market has started to see its pickup. But the first, month or two, it was actually there was a supply issue and demand was outweighing supply. So, I'm impressed, and I'm definitely going to be watching to see how this money, this fund gets spent, because it is the largest sum of money that we've seen dedicated, again, key thing, not general fund, but dedicated to these communities. And being very clear, we know what those communities are because of redlining, because of arrest rates, incarceration numbers. Any government entity could work with Drug Policy Alliance to get what those, stats are. And we should be fueling the money right back into those places. So Illinois is setting a precedent, but at the same time, we're missing out on the sales in the market. They still have not given out the current licenses, 75 that were available and up for grabs. People applied, unfortunately, kept pushing it out. And now what you say, there's no more date, right? The government said, let's just take the date off the calendar. Let's stop pretending like we actually know, because COVID has really inundated their offices with other things that unfortunately still disproportionately impact Blacks and indigenous populations and people of color.
Everything hurts us. Everything impacts us first or the worst. But yes, let's see what they do with this tax revenue and this little equity fund they set up, because we watching y'all. Okay. And so as we watch them, let's bring it over to their neighbor, Michigan, who actually, we reported last season, they were doing a bunch of crazy things leading up to their no caretaker market, as I like to call it, because they were a caretaker market. They had the ability for people to move a little bit more solo in the legalization, but not so much anymore. They want the big businesses to come in, but this business doesn't work if, most of your municipalities opted out for cannabis, and they're starting to see it. So their regulatory board is proposing standalone adult use licenses earlier than what they recommended. So they're trying to get this out as soon as possible, honestly. They're going to see probably a jump in revenue from the state, but I also believe there'll be a jump in accessibility, because vertical licenses are not easy at all. It's quite complicated. It takes a long time. It's a lot of people's input, versus standalone gives it a little bit more of a tier system. You can move a little bit more close to the caretaker licensing process.
100%. I mean, I think Michigan has been a hot mess since it legalized medicinally. We know that the industry has always been sort of gray. They didn't necessarily roll out, take as seriously as they could have, in my opinion, rolling out cannabis regulatory rules that were science-based, evidence-based. It was a lot of bro science in their laws. And it doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, I feel like they are at least willing. And what I've seen out of Lara, which is their liquor oversight, but they have a marijuana agency. And what I've seen out of there is that they will admit that they are learning. They've taken comment from public, but it's always still not really us at the table. And so again, I'm always going to be a proponent of saying, see that people realize within the regulatory structures that they are making mistakes. So stay attuned. We will keep you, of course, always posted, but stay attuned to what's happening in your state, because people are trying to fix the issues that they've been for the last 3, 4, 5 years, 7, 8 years saying, nah, that's okay. That's all good. Now they're trying to fix it. So, what is the benefit here? You're probably asking yourself. One of the benefits, like you said, is a lack of complication. Now, what are some of the risks? Well, when you don't have vertically integrated businesses, the price gets upcharged every time it moves down the supply chain. There's no savings within the supply chain that get transferred back to the consumer. So with that being said, there's a possibility, it doesn't mean it's going to necessarily happen, but there is a possibility that you're going to see much higher price points at the end of the supply chain, because it's like Voltron, we're putting together all of the individual standalone licenses to build out what they need. There's also more risk of bottlenecks. So for example, you may be a person that got a license to be a seller, right? Retailer in some way, but if you don't have product because you don't have the right connections to people who have the flower, meaning cultivating, or people who manufacture products, then you won't have anything on your shelf. And I think in that case, we have to concern ourselves related to the diversity. We also got to just be very, very careful, because standalone licenses are easy to gobble up. It's like Pac-Man, right? They're like little dots, and easy for big companies to come in and say, you know what, I'm going to get 8 standalone and the loan licenses. So I am, again, building my own Power Ranger, Voltron type of situation. So I am now vertically integrated. So those are just the risk, and just making sure that while it is helpful for us, we have to always say, when they're standing up programs, we need to advocate that there are barriers at least put in place to keep those type of risks from happening. What are you doing to mitigate against those risks? Those are the questions I ask.
Great questions. Maybe people in Michigan should take out a pen and write them down, because, as always, She Blaze is dropping jewels on you. Okay. And we are so thankful for you to really break that down for us and let us know ways that it's a benefit and how it could be a con too. So please, people, take notes. We'll send some links in the actual comments. And if you have anything you want us to discuss on any of our hot topics, main topics, or even highs of the weeks, baby, please, please, please drop us a comment, shoot us an email at sheblaze@theweedhead.com. And it has been an amazing episode. I'm so happy to be back. I love to chat. I'm a chatty Cathy, chit chatter. And there's a lot of big things happening in the cannabis industry, and we're glad we caught you guys up on the quick things, but we're still going to catch you up next week too, okay?
Absolutely. Well, as always, Ice, thank you so much for bringing the tea. I knew teaching you how to talk early was going to come in handy, and here we are. When she says she's a chatty Cathy, she is not lying. It says two, okay? So that said, as always, I'm the Weedhead, but you can find me at Dasheeda Dawson on Instagram and Twitter, or the Facebook.com/the Weedhead, okay?
Yes, and make sure you watch and listen to She Blaze anytime on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, baby. Okay. And we are on iHeartRadio, YouTube, WeTube. So check us out on all the platforms, because we up in there, okay? Anytime. Have a great day and a great week. We'll see y'all next Saturday.